$100 silver does not seem likely anytime soon. Even the most bullish amongst us would probably have to face that fact. It just is not around the corner. However, silver is seeing some pretty good momentum now, and we're going to talk about what could lead to $100 silver in the next 3 years. Let's talk about it as we explore. 3 years from now, $34 silver would seem like a bargain. It would need to rise up threefold from where it is now to get there. And in 3 years, that's a pretty big increase. There's no question about it. However, it is doable, and 3 years is a long time, and a lot can happen in 3 years. So, at today's prices, they may seem like a bargain. Now, I'm going to lay out a scenario where this could work. However, understand, it doesn't not necessarily mean that it will work and that we'll get there. Regardless, it's always good to look for dips in the precious metals market. If you are a pure stacker, you find the lowest premium at the best service from a dealer online, and that is Summit Metals, summitmetals.com. You go to your local coin shop, and you check out different prices from different bullion dealers and see where the best deal is. That is part one. But part two is getting the best service you can. And Summit Metals is making a name for themselves for the service they provide. So check out summitmetals.com. Next time you're shopping around for silver, just check them out to see if they have the lowest price and experience their service firsthand. So I'm going to be referencing a piece here by Adam Sharp from Daily Reckoning that really kind of puts things in perspective, especially with regards to inflation-adjusted prices here. So obviously, when we talk about $100 silver over the next couple of years, well, we're talking about the number of dollars that they will be worth in 3 years from now, which will obviously be worth much less than they are now. That's right. 100 of these right now is worth a whole lot more than 100 of them in the next 3 years. That's his case. We have seen silver rip through 40% higher over the past year. It's currently trading about $34 and change. In fact, right now it's at, as I record this video, it's at $34.54 in overnight trading. So it'll be very interesting to see where it is by the time you see this video. Despite the healthy price action, the thought of selling hasn't crossed the author's mind, Mr. Sharp, and you know what? It has not crossed my mind either. In fact, honestly, even if it got up to $50 an ounce in the next couple of weeks here, I don't think I would sell any of it. Maybe a few, depending on what gold does. The only way I would probably sell silver is if I absolutely needed to, or if I wanted to trade up to gold. But nonetheless, I'm not selling at this point in time. So, when pondering how high silver could go, historical prices are a logical place to start. And this is where it gets pretty interesting. But we need to account for inflation. So silver reached an all-time high of around $50 an ounce back in 1980. But that was a special situation. It was simply, in the most simple terms, it was a scheme orchestrated by the Hunt brothers to corner the silver market. Now, there was more involved in it than just that, and I know people will come back and say, well, Sal, yeah, it wasn't that simple. Well, let's just for the sake of argument, and the Hunt brothers played a huge role in it. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, we can't really use the 1980 $50 price as a benchmark, and he's making the case that I've made many times that if you're going to judge where silver's price should be, that ain't it. 1980's high is not it. And you should also not use the 2011 high either, although that is much more likely to happen than the 1980 high that we saw. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we did use that measure. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics official inflation calculation, $50 in 1980 would equate to around $205 in today's money adjusted for inflation. So there's your triple-digit silver already for that back then. But, those are the official inflation numbers. Many of us suspect that federal inflation data is severely understated as part of the chefs at the Cook the Books Club that really tend to tweak the data in order to make things look good politically for whoever's in charge. Well, at least in the past it has, or working against whoever is in charge, as is the case typically what we see right now that is known as the administrative state, or the deep state they call it. But in both 1980 and in 1990, the U.S. government changed the way inflation was calculated. The new methods dramatically lowered the rate of price increases. We did have a recession in 1990, and of course 1980 we saw what happened there. Shadow Stats is one place that we look to get an alternative inflation data set. It was developed by economist John Williams in an attempt to recreate the pre-1980 methodology. So Shadow Stats arrives at a wildly different inflation picture. Instead of inflation peaking at around 9% in 2022, Shadow Stats says it actually peaked at over 16% if we use how they calculate. So if we adjust for silver's price historical price increases that we saw in the past, things get very interesting. And so if you calculate historic precious metal prices but adjust it for inflation using the Shadow Stats numbers, the Shadow Stats adjusted silver price paints a very, very different picture here. I'm talking to the tune of $2,500 silver if we were to use the Shadow Stats figure. That's crazy, $2,500 silver. That is a quadruple digit silver. Yes, indeed. But taking away that high, if we discard it, we can see that the 1983 silver inflation adjusted price reached over $500. And if you look at, if you adjust using an average or what have you, but the numbers seem high. So if you use something in the middle there, but that gives you some perspective. And so when you think about what is looking at it and averaging all out based off of the average from 1980 through 1983, and that would give us about $165 an ounce for silver as a way to kind of adjust it. But the author believes that there's more trouble ahead. Inflation story is still ongoing, and we still have this nagging problem of $36 trillion of federal government debt, which is growing at a rate of $2 trillion per year. And it was $1 trillion every 90 days. But they've scaled that back with the Doge cuts. But the Doge cuts, really, even the most optimist way, it's only going to cut our deficit spending in half, which means that there's still going to be a growing debt out there. Eventually, the Fed will be forced to lower interest rates back to near zero and restart money printing operations again, especially if a recession hits or a bank crisis, and there's already rumbling of more bank failures happening or coming down the pike. So that is something that could possibly happen in a combination thereof. And that, along with inflation, could lead to a stagflationary situation on our hands. And that is not going to be good. No question about that. There will be more stimulus checks to come as austerity and hits and times get tough over the next couple of years if this happens. Each successive round of QE is larger than the last, and this next one will be no different, according to the author. And that may or may not happen. Quantitative easing is as money printing to stimulate the economy if we're in a recession. And of course, politically, no matter what the administration is and their viewpoints are, they want to do something to make themselves look good politically. And so if this starts to happen during the midterms, well, I could definitely see Donald Trump being for quantitative easing, as he was in the past during COVID. So that's something we have to think about. And stimulus checks very well could be on the way. It's quite possible and that the government will eventually implement some form of universal basic income as AI displaces white-collar jobs. Now, that is a ways down the road. That is certainly more than 3 years out for sure. I kind of don't know why he put that in there, but nonetheless, that is a future that is quite possible down the road. Universal basic income has been proposed by Andrew Yang a number of years ago. So both gold and silver have plenty of room to move up, And if some of this stuff does happen, and we do hit ourselves into a deep recession, they are saying that we're going to hit some sort of recession. The Atlanta Fed has already shown that we've got negative GDP growth. If we have another quarter of this, then we are into a technical recession. The Walmart numbers aren't looking good, and Walmart is probably the biggest factor to look at because they're the largest retailer in the world, or here in the United States of America anyway, and that's where a lot of people go for low prices, usually is Walmart. And so that being said, it's quite possible that as gold goes up, as interest rates go down, I think that silver could go up and continue to see these movements to the upside, and maybe even in the next 3 years, especially given the growth that we're seeing now, and more central banks continuing to accumulate gold, silver will follow. It also means that we have the possibility that the gold to silver ratio could reach up over 100 to 1. That is quite possible as well, too. But $100 silver in 3 years, given the scenarios I laid out, is quite possible. Now, I think it's unlikely, though, but nonetheless, it's something we should consider. But it's just a scenario that I want to throw out there based off of what has caught my eye with this piece. And looking at inflation-adjusted highs and looking to kind of where we had been in the past. So we'll see how it plays out. I think most of us would be thrilled, especially if we've been stacking a long time, to see silver hit $50 an ounce. But most of us don't see that happening in the next year or two. So we'll see. But that is this author's case. Do I agree with it? Not really. I don't. Even if everything happens the way he says, if we hit into a recession and there's less economic activity, there's going to be less demand for silver. There really is. And I think that it's going to push back against the silver's price, and that could hurt it. So I think there is that possibility, at least at the very beginning. But, there's other things and other factors involved, and as a recession-proof industries like the green energy sector and the like, and other scenarios, especially if this Samsung battery tech comes to play, they're saying that could hit the potential for manufacturing in 2027. That could have a role, and I think that, in a sense, may be something, especially if it can be done cheaper, that may help things, and some of that stuff is either recession-resistant or recession-proof. We'll see how that plays out. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Do you think it's unrealistic for silver to hit $100 in 3 years? Let me know. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.